Carolyn, will I be able to send this to my mom?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to give people a few more minutes to tune in, and then we'll get started. Thank you so much to students for joining us today. We're going to give people just one more minute to tune in, and then we'll get started. For those of you joining who want to engage with questions, feel free to message them to rustandy.socialqa.com in the link that Stacy Ergang sent out, our Student Life sent earlier today. All right, hello and welcome to Booth Alumni Perspectives, Building Resilience in Times of Crisis. We're thankful to all of you for taking the time to join us today. I want to extend a sincere and warm welcome to your Spring 2020 quarter. We know this quarter is taking an unexpected and unknown format. My name is Carolyn Grossman, and I'm the Senior Director of Programs and Global Initiatives at the Rosenblum Center for Social Sector Innovation and Adjunct Assistant Professor of Strategy here at Chicago Booth. Most of you know me wearing these two hats, either as a student who I've connected with through Rustandy's programs, or as a student in one of my classes. But I do wear a third hat connected to Booth. I'm an alumna of the full-time class of 2003, which is especially important relative to today's program. Before coming to Booth as a student, I spent my first 3 years out of college as a teacher. But I wanted to work outside of the classroom, and in the summer of 2000, I got my dream job, a leadership role at a brand new social enterprise startup dedicated to providing online resources to an underrepresented group of society. It was my dream job because it was mission-driven and profit-driven, and it was going to run sustainably. This .com was venture-backed by one of the premier groups of investors in New York City. I had stock options, and I felt like the sky was the limit. Now that I've mentioned .com, venture-backed, and stock options, you can probably predict the rest of the story. Our company blew through $10 million relatively quickly and went bust a few months later, not years, just in time for me to get my round 2 applications into business school. In spite of that experience, I came to Booth expecting nothing but opportunity and promise. I was sure I would land a consulting job to ultimately pivot to social impact and be back on track, and was full of excitement when I moved from New York City, my hometown, to Hyde Park in the fall of 2001. Fast forward to the first day of lead, we were supposed to sit by cohort, but I never made it into the room. You see, my first day of lead was September 11th, 2001. And I got caught up in the hallway outside the event. There was a big TV up, and I was watching the towers burn. And I was trying desperately on my flip phone to reach my friends and family. Once the shock wore off, it was a very different job market than any of us had anticipated. And as we adapt to the unexpected challenges presented by COVID-19, I found myself personally thinking about my own start to Booth much more so than I do on a typical basis. And I'm really thinking of all of you and what it is to find yourselves in an unexpected crisis. So I've also thought it's really helpful to learn from others who were also Booth students through uncertain economic times, which is why we wanted to bring you all here today. Today's event is a true collaborative group effort. Your co-hosts today are the Rosenblum Center for Social Sector Innovation, the destination at Booth for people committed to helping solve complex social and environmental problems. Much like Booth has changed the way business is done, our goal is to make the social sector more effective at creating and implementing innovative solutions to pressing social and economic problems. The Harry L. Davis Center for Leadership. The Davis Center is an incubator and proving ground for generating new perspectives on leadership, which drive innovation in education and managerial practice. The Davis Center strives to instill a culture of continual discovery for future generations of students through a deep commitment to collaboration and experimentation. And third, student life, which exists to support students in their experiences outside of the classroom, be it in virtual or live format. Student Life collaborates with more than 80 student groups and group program offices to create programs and events to support students personally and professionally. Today, you'll hear from a panel of Booth alumni who were students during major societal and economic upheavals, including the Great Recession of 2008, the national crisis of 9/11, and the stock market crash of '87. This discussion is an opportunity for you to pause, reflect, and learn from the stories of these alumni, and to ask any questions that these challenging times might have surfaced for you. It's our hope that in doing so, you'll gain encouragement from our panelists and draw inspiration about how to move forward as students and as a community through today's crisis. Before I introduce our panelists and we kick things off, here are some logistics for today. I'm going to begin by asking the panelists a series of questions, which include topics submitted by some of you ahead of time. A lot of you had career-related questions, many of which we'll address, but others of which will be covered in the Career Services Town Halls for second years yesterday and for first-year students today at 4:45. Then we'll take questions from all of you. We're using a platform called Social QA to moderate the Q&A platform. And I've got it right here on my trusty iPad. So I'm seeing exactly what you are seeing, students. If you have a question for the panelists, please do submit it to rustandy.socialqa.com. You can type this URL into a web browser on your phone. We sent the link this also in a reminder email. And once our team approves the question, it'll be published and viewable by everyone. You can then choose to upvote a question that others have submitted that you'd also like to get answered. So as moderator, I can start to see how you as a group of students are thinking and what you're interested in hearing more about from our panelists. Now, let me introduce our panelists. Louis Miranda graduated from Booth in 1989. Currently, he serves as chairman at the Center for Civil Society and NGO CORO. He is the founder director at the Indian School of Public Policy, senior advisor at Morgan Stanley, and Rustandy Center Advisory Council member. Louis has been involved in setting up two highly successful companies, HDFC Bank and IDFC Private Equity, after which he retired to focus on nonprofit capacity building. He serves on the board of Educate Girls and the SBI Foundation and co-founded Take Charge, a mentoring program for Catholic youth in Mumbai. And Louis is joining us tonight from Mumbai, where it's currently 10:30 p.m. So Louis definitely gets the prize for panelists who's sitting on a panel latest at night. If there were a prize for that, it goes to him. Dean Rosenblum graduated in Booth in 2002 and was actually somebody I met at first day when I was a prospective student at Booth. He's currently an entrepreneur and independent consultant, bringing nearly 20 years experience to help senior teams set strategy, drive execution, accelerate growth, and more. Previously, he served in leadership roles at PetSmart, Aramark, and PepsiCo. Katherine Glasser graduated Booth in 2009. Currently, she serves as president at IDEX Corporation. Previously, Kate served on Dow Chemical's global leadership team as the business director and general manager of the Dow Coatings business. Thank you so much to the three of you for joining us today. And I'm really struck by how special it is to have people from multiple locations joining us. Dean from Arizona, Kate from the North Shore, and Louis from Mumbai. As a final reminder, please submit your questions through our discussion at rustandy.socialqa.com. With that, let's dive in. If you could each get us started by introducing yourselves, that would be terrific. You were in school during the '87 crash, 9/11, and '08 financial crisis. Starting with Louis, let's hear about what memories you have from that time. How did the event impact the mood and environment? And what really changed?
Thanks, Caroline. When I look back at what happened at that time, October 1987, I was in Gene Pharma's class that afternoon, and the stock market crashed that morning. And Gene Pharma walks into the class and tells us that, someone from the media had called him up for his views, and he said, it just happened, call me back after 6 months and I'll tell you what happened here. But to me, that event actually changed my life, and I'm so glad that that it took place, because the journey that it led me to was something which is just fascinating. A lot of you guys weren't even born at that time, and when we came by, class of '88 had just come back. They were all excited about the booming economy, and suddenly they saw their job offers taken away. And there was, real tension over there. It was tough getting an internship for me in 1988. Besides that, I was a foreigner also. So being a foreigner was also difficult to get a job. And I attended a friend's kid's christening party in Evanston. And I met his brother, who was the CFO at Citibank. And he asked me, Louis, what are you doing for the summer? And I said, I don't know. He said, come and work for me. That's how I ended up my internship. And then when I came back to campus, Business Week did its first ranking of business schools in late '88. And placements were bad at that time. We didn't have Julie Morton in the school at that time. And you can see smiles over there, yeah. And it was difficult, and the students hated the school. We were not ranked, in that survey, we didn't come as a top 10 business school at all. Students ranked us number 20. But that gave me a chance to work on something which we'll talk about later, starting LEAD. But at that time, when I look back at some of the memories, I had a collection of ding letters. These are letters telling you that you don't have a job for you. And remember, this was 1988, 89, when there was no internet. We would actually get postal letters saying that, you didn't have jobs. And both the jobs I got for the summer internship and for the full-time program were outside placements. And it was just also by accident. We'll talk more about that later. But to me, it sort of created that platform for me to sort of have this great career in India. I came back, I met my wife. We dated long distance for 3 years. And that to me was the excitement about it. It was a challenging time getting jobs, but it worked out fine for me at the end.
Great. And Dean, take us to your experience in school.
So, Caroline, as you said, 9/11 was the first day of LEAD, and I was a facilitator, so I was the second year. And in an instant, the mood went from excitement and sort of pure potential to what the hell is going on? Like, what just happened? Are we at war? This was arguably the most disorienting public event that I think pretty much anybody had sort of ever experienced. And as you know, Carolyn, my brother was in one of the towers working at a trading firm called Cantor Fitzgerald, and he was actually killed in 9/11. So for me, I don't actually experience the public event of 9/11 the way that most do, because I was so personally affected by it. Look, what I'd say is what changed the most is obviously just the general mood. That was first, but more importantly, we went from clarity and opportunity to just pervasive and profound uncertainty. And that arguably was the most difficult thing to sort of metabolize. I just want to highlight too that the 9/11 attacks happened concurrent to the crash of the dot-com boom, right? So particularly for students in the class ahead of mine, the amount of turbulence and uncertainty in the job market was profound. Offers were rescinded, start dates were delayed, et cetera. So the dot-com bust happened, and then 9/11. So it was a very uncertain time. And I guess that we'll go into, so what did you do, et cetera. We'll go into all that during the discussion, but most acutely, it was just, oh my God, what the heck is going on? Arguably in a similar time frame to what's happened with COVID-19.
Yeah.
In a period of 6 weeks, the country went from being, everything is normal to I can't leave my house.
Yeah. And Kate, you also were in school during a crisis, Wall Street crisis that then permeated throughout society. Could you take us back to what it was like to be in school 0809? And how did that impact the mood and environment?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. And for everybody that's at Booth, first of all, I hope all of you are safe and sound and your families are healthy as well. This is definitely a stressful time, and hearts and thoughts are with you guys for sure. For Booth, for me at the time, it was fascinating. I came in as GSB. I left as Booth. And the beginning, the first year we were there, things were kind of normal, like what you would expect, right? You had high expectations. You were told we were the best business school in the universe. And so expectations were high that everyone was going to land the job that they wanted, and it was going to be pretty straightforward. And that is more or less what happened for internships the year I was there. If I can recall, my first year coming in, a whole bunch of second years came back to campus, all with their heads shaved with mohawks and crazy hair. And I remember asking, what's going on? Oh, they're bankers. That's what they do, because once they get into banking, they have to be all uptight and whatever. Come into second year, and everyone's got their offers after their internships, and all of a sudden the world just plunges into an unknown space. And the first people that were impacted were the banking group. And after they had all this faith and this convinced that they were going to be fine, all of a sudden, it wasn't even that offers were rescinded, because that was a big part of it, but banks were collapsing. And there was just no place to go. And so all of a sudden you had this huge shift in high expectations, ruling the world, we're going to be fine, to can anybody help me? And that really became the pervasive commentary, I would say, in the spring of 2009 before graduation was, can you help me? And how can I help you? And that was true from Booth, and it was true between the students. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I had, was that people quickly got over any ego that was out there and were willing to help each other out, and were willing to stop and ask for help.
So,
Caroline, sorry, I just want to add one more tiny slice of context. As Kate was talking about banks collapsing. So concurrent to the dot-com bust and 9/11, in October 2001, Enron collapsed. So
yeah,
fun stuff.
indeed. And so amid all of that collapse, I'm really struck by the opportunity that crisis does unlock. We simply would never get the three of you in a room together during the first week of a business as usual spring quarter. And so, Kate, you just touched on this. Louis and Dean, I'm wondering if you can talk about what opportunities were unlocked by the experience of the societal crisis that you experienced. And Louis, if you could take us back to 1987 and just how it brought you together, that would be a great place to start.
So first of all, we were struggling with internships in the summer of '88. And then we come back, and then Business Week tells us that we're not a top school. We're not even a top 10 school. And Harry Davis asked me if I could help him get a bunch of students together to advise the school on what we should do. And that process actually became, to me, the most interesting opportunity I had over there. That whole exercise ended up in creating LEAD. And for me, it was a chance to be involved in creating the only course that was compulsory for everyone to take ever since then in the last 30 years. It also then got me to come back to India. And I remember getting this letter from Citibank, from the Asia Pacific guys saying, Louis, we'd like you to come to India, to come to New York for an interview for the Asia Pacific group. I wasn't planning on coming back to India initially, but to me, it was a free trip to New York. And Caroline, I called up a friend of yours, I won't mention her name, and we decided to go out for dinner. And that's the only reason I went actually to New York for that interview. I got drunk that evening, and the next morning I'm having this interview. I had the first interview with a chap from New York, the second with a guy from Singapore. And third guy I was interviewing being interviewed by was a chap from India, and he talked about a career in marketing. Lewis, what would you think about marketing foreign exchange in India? I had no idea what he was talking about here. I was an accountant before that, and here was this guy talking about marketing. He got me so excited. And that's what was interesting about that interview. I went in for an interview not knowing what I was going to be interviewed for. And it came out to be something which changed my life. He talked about this fabulous job. I decided to go back to India. I have the distinction of being the lowest paid guy in my graduating class. I got the princely salary of $4,000 a year. But to me, it was just the job was interesting. And that's one of the lessons I keep telling people today. Focus more about the job, not so much about the money today, because focus on what you can build up. I then went back to India, 5 years out of business school. I get a chance to start a bank in India. I would never have thought about that in '89 when I graduated. We started a bank in India, which we wanted to just prove as a great bank to be associated with. Today, it's the most valuable bank in India, called HDFC Bank. And then at the heat of the dot-com bubble, I decided I've had enough of that and I wanted to go on the investing side. I joined a venture firm just when the bubble's bursting, because to me, it was a chance to do something different. And then I started investing in infrastructure again, purely by accident. So what are the 2 lessons that I gained from this? One, challenge everything. Challenge every conventional logic you had. People told me I was crazy every time I did something, all these changes. And that actually created the exciting journey for me. Don't do what everybody else. Normal is boring. That's the first thing I learned in Chicago, which is challenge everything. The second lesson I learned in Chicago was if something is broken, don't grumble about it, fix it. That's what we did with LEAD. That's what we did with infrastructure in India and stuff like that. So these are, to me, I look back and say, if the crash of '87 hadn't happened, I don't think I would have had this journey today.
Wow.
And Lewis, I just want to check on some of your advice there to make sure I got it right. So definitely get drunk before your big interview. Is that what I heard? Just want to make sure.
Yep, but the interesting point was, Kate, what you said is very true. But I didn't know it was going to be my big interview also.
I joke.
Dean, I know you also wanted to jump in on how opportunities were unlocked for you in such a tough year, in which, I do remember knowing that you were undergoing such a personal crisis, and you were still showing up as a lead facilitator in the program that Lewis had helped to start with Harry, and infusing us first years with so much energy.
Yeah, so I want to be really transparent with the students, right? The dot-com bust and 9/11 did not affect my career trajectory because my situation was not disrupted. I was a summer associate at Bain and had a full-time offer coming back into my second year, and that offer remained. And the start date was not delayed or anything like that. But for students who were ahead of me by a year, the class of 2001, and for many students in the class of 2002, the reality is the sort of well-worn career tracks that frankly pre-existed our arrival on campus, that those paths were, for many of us, inaccessible, right? And I mentioned this, when we were preparing for the panel. What I saw is that because, let me just sort of wind it back for a second. Look, you arrive on campus, and for a lot of us, the career path begins with, and frankly, for a lot of us, is sort of limited to those paths that are, pre-existing, well-traveled, and waiting for us when we get here. But when the crisis happens and the paths become inaccessible, the reality is we're forced to cut new paths. And there's 2 things about having to cut a new path that I think result in a different outcome from following the path well traveled. The first is it takes a ton of grit, a ton of self-determination, and a ton of focused effort over time. I can't see her on screen, but I hope Julie Morton is, I know she's dialed in. I hope she's nodding right now. It is not going to be easy. This, as a result, and frankly, maybe upstream from that, it also takes a really strong sense of direction. And what I mean by that is really looking inside and saying, what do I want to do? Where do I want to end up? Completely independent of the sort of pie chart of career tracks that everybody had in mind when we arrived on campus. Because the reality is that cutting new paths is going to be hard work. So I think it's useful to think about where you want that path to lead. And in my experience, particularly later in my career, if we're authentic and mindful and intentional about this direction setting, we can often end up a lot closer to where we ultimately want to be, and in many cases a lot sooner. And I love, Lewis, I loved what you said about if you're making choices, particularly now, about where you want to end up because of career prestige or salary, probably maybe there's another place to sort of look for direction. So for me, after Pepsi, if I had an opportunity to do some work for myself, filed a bunch of patents. I have 4 patents issued, another couple pending, and right now I'm working on commercializing a product that relates to a couple of patents that I have already issued. And I wouldn't have gotten here if I didn't allow myself that space to just move towards something that really drew me intrinsically. So I don't know if that makes any sense. But
that's great. So obviously, none of you were asked to social distance in 87, 01, 08, but your classmates all experienced challenges in different ways. And Kate, you talked a little bit about the folks who came back from Wall Street with exuberant haircuts. And I'm wondering how you maintained social connections during times of stress, and what advice you have for today's students.
So yeah, I'll jump in with that. This is obviously something most of us have never dealt with as far as being this socially isolated in this perspective. So, but what I do think, and what I've seen in my own personal life, and all these challenges that we face, whether they're huge like COVID-19 or personal, present you with opportunities to reflect, to figure out what to do next if it's not going to be what you expected the day before or the month before, whatever the case may be. In this case, I think first of all, it's so different than what it was before that we should all give ourselves a little pat in the back that we wake up in the morning, hopefully put some clothes on and get on and do something productive that day. It's tough to change things so drastically and to have all these things fall up in front of you that you expected to be there. And I think especially tough when you're at business school and you just see this whole future laid out for you in this wonderful path. And then all of a sudden, everything, that whole staircase is pulled out from under you and you're just stuck staring in this abyss wondering what is going to happen next. So I do think there's that feeling of giving yourself a little bit of freedom to be okay with having a bad day or two in this process. I guess I liken this, and I've seen the different challenges I've had in my life, a bit to culture shock. It's probably not the best or the perfect example, but for me, like you start with, when I go to a new country, and I've lived in a couple different countries, you go with this excitement, okay, or adrenaline. I'm just going to get through this. We're going to be fine. It's going to be good. And then you kind of find a new normal for a little bit, and it almost seems manageable. And then comes a big crash of what on earth is going on. And that's how I think a lot of people feel right now. And you can do 2 things. You can revert into yourself, or you can reach out to other people. And what I saw in 2009 was a lot more reaching out and a lot more help that was proactively offered, especially from Booth. There was a ton of help to get people jobs. That was the #1 concern at that time. It wasn't the social aspect as much. It was around, am I going to have a job when I graduate? And people helped each other out with connections and opportunities. But Booth stepped in and they went out and said, if we can't get jobs at all these normal places we get jobs, they've cut down. we're going to go find so many other opportunities and just knock on all of those doors over and over again till they hire one person and then maybe two. And we got to the point where everybody coming out, or almost everybody, Julie can correct me on this, had a job coming out in 2009. And it was just incredible. And all those people, whether they kept them long-term or not, they worked very hard to get those jobs and to make sure that we had this just communal feeling of, okay, we're going to get through this together.
So I'm gonna jump in with a question that came in on the social QA, because Kate, I think you touched on it so nicely. The top question that everyone wants to hear is, what is the one activity that you did that most improved how you got through the crisis? What was it, and how did it make an impact?
Dean, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll be really honest with the students listening, because if you're talking about from a career perspective, I really wasn't impacted from a career perspective. But let me talk about how I got through the crisis. The theme of the panel discussion is resilience, and let me just focus on that for just a second. What does it even mean? What does it mean in this context? And I think that's useful. There's a physical dimension to resilience. And a sort of behavioral dimension. The physical and the behavioral mean the exact same thing, which is the ability to spring back to form in the physical sense. In the behavioral sense, it's the ability to recover from adverse or traumatic experience. And Kate was talking about it just now. Look, in 2012, my job was eliminated at Pepsi after being there for 6 years. And I could have crawled into, a closet and just shut the door and close the lights and wished something had been different. The reality, though, is it was what it was. And like Kate said, you have to sort of put on clothes and get up in the morning and take the next step. And I think that may be the one thing, right? Is, sometimes, and I can tell you for sure for 9/11, this was my experience, sometimes you have to sit still and hurt. And that's not always fun. But at a certain point, the sitting still and hurting subsides, and the human spirit is incredibly malleable and resilient. And the sooner we can get past ruining what is and thinking about what can I do in this situation, that's the moment that you can sort of begin charting the next course, which is simply to take action. And my advice would be, think about where you want to be, what you want to do, and then beat down every door and turn over every rock toward that direction.
To me, I think it's networking. I had just to talk to a lot of people. Both the jobs I got were from outside the placements office. When I went to went to New York for that interview, I found out later that the guy interviewing me from India had spoken to people that I had known at business school and people that I worked with earlier, and they had good things to say about me. So the more people you know, the more people who will talk about you and give recommendations is so important. And that's what helped me move from accounting to foreign exchange. And then I moved from foreign exchange into private equity, and from private equity went into infrastructure investing, and then into the nonprofit space. So it's really that network. And today people ask me, what's your core skill? It's connecting dots. That I think is my core skill. It's not about being the smartest. I'm really the smartest guy in the room, but I can connect dots very well.
Louis, I know that you've had a career and path that has really had an impact on society. What does this look like for you?
Oh, it's been fabulous. I mean, I've just been lucky, I think. If I look back, there's no way that I could, from where I started off. I never had money in the bank till I was about in my 30s. And when I left Chicago, I never thought I'd meet a lot of my classmates. I wouldn't be able to afford so. And I was just lucky to have these opportunities to start a bank, to get into private equity, to be there when things were changing. People thought I was crazy to be in banking, to start an Indian bank at that time, or to invest in infrastructure. But today it gave me that base that 10 years back, I could say, okay, I've had enough and I'm moving on to doing something in the social space. Now look back at the last 10 years, I've had a chance to set up a public policy school. We're all about, and that's got a tie up with Harris at Chicago. And we're changing minds at the moment. I'm in fact having a struggle with them because this is our first batch and they're going to be, they're looking for jobs at the moment and they're going through the same tension you guys are. My son, by the way, is a senior at U Chicago, graduating in June. And he's also looking at struggling to get a job. And I know it's a bad news. There's no convocation. That news just came out today. It's a bummer, but that too will pass here. But so today, for example, what's keeping me busy? I'm working, for example, on a lot of the daily wage earners who are impacted by COVID-19. In the last 2 weeks, I've become an expert on food chain in the retail space. How do we get food to people when there's no sort of supply chain is broken and people aren't there? The last 3 days, I've figured out how to make masks for people, non-surgical masks that we can supply to people. That's the stuff that I'm involved with today. It's great fun. It's chaotic, but that sort of move to India created those opportunities to be crazy.
So really picking up on that, times of crisis and uncertainty can lead to opportunities for people, especially young people, to step up and lead. How did the crisis you experienced as a Booth student shape your own leadership approach at this time? And Kate, maybe you could start us off by talking about how it impacted your leadership journey to where you are today.
Sure. I think that there's always an opportunity to step up and lead, and that anyone can kind of take those horns and run with it as they want to. These situations tend to cause that opportunity to be even bigger, right? People get nervous, they get fearful, they don't know what to believe. We're seeing it right now where we work. There's just that uncomfortableness with being uncomfortable, right? When the status quo is not met anymore, what goes on? And that opportunity, in these scenarios, what I've seen from my classmates and from myself is getting to, like Dean, my career was not impacted directly at the time. My offer stuck with Dow Chemical. They wanted to bring in people that would be leadership longer term. And so what happened was you went into an organization that had just had major layoffs. And so they were already lacking in leadership opportunities. And so it was for those of us that came in that class, we got to step into some pretty big roles really quickly and had to figure it out as we went. And I think a lot of that comes down to what you're comfortable with yourself and your own leadership capabilities, where your gaps are, where you need to learn, and being willing to take that next step to say, I can do this. I'm going to get help where I need it, and just step into those shoes, like walk through that doorway when you see it. And so I think there's that moment where you have to move from being fearful and unsure of what's going to happen next to being willing to take that step, whatever that looks like for you. And if there's some reflection time and where you want to move, what you want to go do, it comes down to that comfort level of actually opening the door, walking through it, making that decision, and being willing to kind of put your own ideas on the line about where you should go. And in these circumstances, you tend to find not everybody wants to make that step. And so if you take that, you will stand out among your peers.
So I'm now looking at the questions that are coming in from all of you. So if you want to weigh in with questions for our panelists, either to put in your own or to upvote, the link is rustandy.socialqa.com. Again, that's rustandy.socialqa.com. And the top question right now is, what do you wish you would have thought about or prioritized when you were at Booth? And I will let anyone who wants to jump in and start, please do.
I'll jump in. So Caroline, when I arrived at Booth, I had been a chef by trade. I had literally just finished my undergrad degree because I'd gone back to college in hospitality management at 32 years old. I didn't know what private equity was. I thought it meant you had to be a member or something. I didn't know what the I in iBanking stood for. So for me, when I got to Booth, and Julie will attest to this because we spent a lot of time together, I gravitated very quickly to the consulting track because it was big, it was prestigious, it was a good fit. I think in retrospect, I would like to have taken more time to explore what else was out there and to put it against what I thought might be not only interesting work and prestigious work, but frankly, intrinsically gratifying. If I had done that, I'm not sure that I would have gone the consulting route. I had a tremendous experience, but I may have done something different if I had chosen to explore paths that weren't yet well worn.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that question? What you wished you had done at Booth?
No.
No.
So yeah, I'll jump in with just two quick thoughts on it. One is what I wish I had done at Booth. The one thing I didn't do at Booth that I really wish I had, and I'm not sure how it plays out in the current environment, was New Venture Challenge. So it was such a cool opportunity and such a neat thing. And I don't consider myself an entrepreneur by any stretch of the imagination, but just having the chance to go through that and really take that, everything at Booth, right, is this risk-free environment. And so no matter what the environment is externally, you still have this amazing playground that everyone's sitting in, and to get too caught up in the ins and outs of our current situation doesn't allow you to take full advantage of what you have in front of you. So if you have the bandwidth, do something that scares you a little bit on the class side. On the flip side, oh, sorry, Carolyn, go ahead.
Oh, what's really interesting about the fact that you brought up NVC, with which kicked off last week, and the Social New Venture Challenge for the quarter kicked off yesterday, is that there was actually a huge spike in interest in entrepreneurship in 08, 09, 10, and the moment really seemed to inspire a lot of creativity. And Polsky and Rustandy will be coming back to you, students, later this quarter to help tell some of those stories as well. So something to be on the lookout for. Sorry, I cut you off, Kate.
No, I was just going to say one more thing that I kind of give as overall advice, and that I think about, that I did not think about while I was at Booth, but it's an opportunity to think about those things. It's a weird thing to say in a school environment, but in life, as you guys are looking at all the choices you have in front of you, my one big piece of advice is to choose your life partner very wisely. There will be many ups and downs in your career. COVID-19 may be the first thing that you are seeing that's really a big bummer. There will be other things that happen. You will lose jobs, you will lose family, you will have difficult things happen, and the people that you have closest to you will help you get through those things. So I always say this to people, there's a lot of career advice out there, but fundamentally what gets you through every day's ups and downs is a big part of what makes you you.
Well, Kate, you're in good company with that advice. It's at the heart of Marianne Bertrand's convocation address a couple of years ago. And I will send the article on it to you after this. And if any students Google Marianne Bertrand convocation, there was an article on it in the Chicago Booth Review talking about why she made this point. Her point is one that a labor economist would make, but I'm happy to send anyone who can't find it the link. You can just ping me. So I think the next question from students is a really honest and raw one, which is that crises tend to bring out overt negativity in people. How were you able to navigate feelings of negativity among your class?
Could I take a crack at that? And about 3-4 days back, a friend of mine gave a talk on how do you navigate yourself through this. He's a guy called Pramat Sinha, who started the Indian School of Business and a few other educational institutions. And he was a former McKinsey consultant, so everything he talks about has 3 points. So I'm going to list out the 3 points that he talked about. One was, he said, you got to acknowledge and accept the situation we're in. Second is have a plan. And third is write it out. And for each of these 3 points, he had sub points, again, 3 of each. So an acknowledge and accept. 1, this is happening. 2, this has happened before. And 3, this too shall pass. So when you talk about negativity, it's tough to be here. But remember, you're not the first time, this is not the first time it's happened. Now, 3 of us have been through tough times. Possibly this is the mother of all those tough times, and the last time it possibly happened was 100 years back, but still it's happened before, and it shall pass. have a plan. And the first point over there was take charge. You can't just leave it to the placement office, Julie, as a magician, but you also got to take charge and try to work things out on yourself. 2, be flexible and agile. For example, if it means taking an unpaid internship, starting on going back to a foreign country, go back to your home country and getting paid a pittance, great, because that doesn't mean that's going to be there for the rest of your life. And 3, invest for the future. So figure out what else you can pick up, what skills. And then in terms of writing it out, he talks about 1, being patient. It's not necessarily that you would have a job by the time you graduate, but you will get a job eventually because you're at the best business school in the country. 2, stay connected. Stay connected to people who can help you, talk to people. And 3 is keep the faith. New things will always happen. Who would have thought that I'd be marketing foreign exchange in India? I didn't know what the job was about when I went in for my interview. I ended up as a career. I did that for 11 years. So, and I thought I went to business school to become a consultant. And I did nothing of that in the last sort of 30 years. So that's the thing, it is this thing of negative. It's very easy to get negative. And just remember that this is not the first time it's happened. And this too shall pass.
I love that advice. I'm going to jump in on something not nearly as prophetic as all of that. That was wonderful. This is something that I learned personally, and it's much more minute, but just a kind of a trick of the trade. When I lived in Midland, Michigan with Dow Chemical, which is roughly 2 hours north of Detroit, it's a very small company town. And we found that you're talking about work all the time. It's not the same as this, but what happens is, what's the tendency when you talk about work? It tends to move negative. And so you're out at a party, you're out with friends, and it all comes back to work and moves negative. And so one of our rules we put in place was there are certain times of the day and certain days when we just didn't talk about work. We just didn't talk about anything negative. You had to talk about something else. And so we've instituted that now at our work, where I work now at IDEX, with my team, where there are times when we only talk about the crazy things like Tiger King. We're not allowed to talk about what's going on with COVID-19, and we're not allowed to talk about what's happening with politics. We only talk about something fun because everybody needs a little bit of that zone that's safe.
I love you guys.
Super.
I just want to offer 2 thoughts, right? So the question is, how do you deal with negativity? And it's not just negativity around us, but negativity inside of us. Look, it's very easy to feel angry that this is happening. It's very easy to feel paralyzed and sad, which can metabolize quickly into depression, particularly for people who are inclined toward depression, which is a real thing. 2 things. One is self-care. And by self-care, I'm talking specifically about getting up in the morning and doing something physical, eating properly, taking care of oneself from a human perspective. And then the second thing is, I can only hold one thought in my head at a time. I might as well make it a good one. And those 2 practices for me have gotten me through a lot of very difficult times in my life, which I won't go into, but self-care and try and focus on something that is on the positive side of the spectrum, and carry on.
Which really
But I just want to say something else, Caroline. If you notice, I've been wishing everybody to stay negative these days. So it's sometimes it's good to be negative in the COVID situation where you. But I think it's what Kate and Dean were talking about. It's so important. If you have one, I love that. If you have only one thought in your head, don't make it a negative one. Super.
So how come booth students, boothies, something all of us share is an ability to be very linear and an ability to jump in and solve problems. Kate talked about how when she was in school, the sort of #1 problem was jobs, and people jumped in to tackle that. And certainly that things like that are going on now, and how to forge social connections in a time of social distance is something that you can sort of approach and tackle and address with the constraints at hand. But some of the students want to hear about, I'm looking back at my social QA, What can we do not only to weather the crisis, but to come out as better individuals?
I'd like to jump in on that, if I may. So look, if this does nothing for all of our development as human beings, it will decidedly teach us that crises will occur, and as Lewis said earlier, they will pass. It's very difficult to maintain perspective when you're in something. It becomes easier when you see it again later, and you're like, oh, that looks a lot like this other thing that I went through. If you can imagine a time when COVID-19 is not an active thing, it will give you perspective now. And the experience of going through this now will give you perspective when each of us faces adversity later in our lives, and we'll know that, as Lewis said, this too in time shall pass.
I think the point I'd like to talk about is remembering that the downside is limited. We worry too much about the downside. So here was I looking at taking up a job in India, paying $4,000 a year. Just to put things in perspective again, an MBA at that time cost $50,000, a lot less than what it is today. But I was getting a job where I'd be treated on par with someone who was much junior to me. And that didn't also make me happy. But the fact that there were classmates of mine in undergrad who would be 4 or 5 years senior to me, and I wasn't getting credit for that. But to me, the job was interesting, and I took it. Because I look back and said, what's the downside? I come back over here and I find I don't do well. I can always come back to the US, figure out some other job and stay on in the US later. Similarly, when I sort of moved out of a foreign bank to start a bank, what is the downside? I look like a fool. The bank will fail. I'll crawl back and get my ego bashed, but I can come back. So remember always that the downside is not as bad as we make it out to be.
Yeah, I would add in too. I'm trying to think. One of the things that stuck with me from 2009, I was heavily pregnant with my first baby in business school, and I had her in 2009. And I remember seeing one of my very good friends and classmates from Israel in the lunch line one day, and we were talking about how crazy the crisis was and how worried we were about not getting jobs and all these different things going on. And he looked at me and he was like, what are you so worried about? It's like, the only thing that matters is what you got in your belly. Like life is going to keep going on. You take care of you, take care of your family, and we're all going to be okay. And there's some truth to that. Like the one thing you can do is kind of come back into yourself and say, all right, what is it that really truly matters? That, to your point, Dean, you're talking about earlier, that North Point or whatever it may be, that North Star, and just aim for that. And you might not get there in a straight path, but you'll get there eventually.
I think I think Lewis has certainly touched on the question of, oh, sorry, I'm going to change questions now. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm going to ask a question about social life. Did the crisis affect your social life? And if not yours, what did you see going on among your classmates?
Okay, so let's look at my situation. I was going back to India, getting paid peanuts. My classmates were getting jobs elsewhere. One of the guys I was sharing an apartment with got all the banking jobs over there, so he was having this fancy life. We had planned to go skiing in Banff, going here. I canceled all those trips. I just couldn't afford it. So I canceled all of that, and it was a bummer at that time. But you're looking at it in a longer period of time, it was totally irrelevant. So yes, it did impact my social life. I knew I wasn't going to be able to spend what I was doing when I was in Chicago for the last few months, but that was fine.
I'd like to jump in. One of the things in particular that 9/11 did is it created an environment where people were so authentic, so genuine, so real. Like in the booth environment, there's a tendency to maintain a certain persona that is something we all share. But in times of crisis, we're affected as human beings, and we interact as human beings. And there was a level of genuineness, of genuine sharing and genuine listening that that really fostered relationships that transcended just the campus social life. So I don't know if that helps. Clearly, it's difficult to have a robust social life. I don't know if TNDC is still a thing. I presume it is. But you know, think about the closeness that can form into lifelong friendships out of crisis that arguably is different to the outcome of just normal social interaction.
Yeah, Dean, I saw the same thing in 2009. I agree with you. People pulled closer. And there's that tendency from first year where you want to meet everybody to second year where you want to have deeper relationships anyway. And then it gets even deeper and more needed as you need people to be around you when those things are going on. And granted, this situation, you can't have physical people around you, but there's some pretty amazing games and watching movies together. And I'm sure there's plenty of TNDC drinking games online that are available somehow. But there is that need to find that space to do it. And so my advice on this is, like anything else you would do, block your calendar for social time and set it up and put it on there so it stays recurring and important to you.
Well, I'm confident that our students can do the best possible job at staying connected virtually, or certainly better than us older folks. Although I will say my 13-year-old is doing a decent job as well. So I think somewhere like it, you know, the younger you are to a point, you really have an advantage at figuring out how to navigate this stuff. So.
Yeah, I don't know that it's any consolation for the students going through it right now, but imagine if this had happened when Lewis was in school, like not only before, you know, not only before the internet, but arguably like at the seeds of mobile telephony. I mean, this was whole, like it was like we can interact this way and still be physically isolated, but we can connect in a way that frankly didn't exist not that many years ago.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask one more tangible question that's up on the social QA, and then ask our last question for general advice. So students, if you do have any burning questions, please, or anything else you want to hear asked, please upvote it on the social QA. So I know what's most important to cover. There's something really tangible about networking. How do you suggest networking should be approached in a scenario where everyone's staying home?
Oh, you know what? I think it's such a neat opportunity to approach it because everybody's in the same, very similar space, right? Everyone's got their bookshelves behind them, trying to figure out how to make this work, kids or whatever, running dogs, barking in the background. And so it sort of humanizes everybody in a way that may be harder to connect when everybody's in their suit and ties. And I do think at this point, everybody's looking for some connection as well. Their calendars may have changed drastically considering what's going on and what their lives are like at work. So, you know, we've seen, what we've seen at work is we've had people much higher up in our customers' organizations calling back into us because they have time on their hands all of a sudden they didn't used to have. So to me, it's one of those same situations where in what may seem like, how do we go do this? It's actually created a huge opportunity for new ways to make that happen. I mean, a virtual coffee break is always a good idea, right? Everyone likes coffee or beer.
So I'd look at a lot of the networks that I built up was stuff that were done across countries without physical connection. And when you look today, my advice would be to go out to the alumni. The alumni directory is a great sort of way to connect with people. I mean, I've heard that from a lot of students that, you know, the alumni from Booth have been very supportive. And I think that's something which you should look at. And the alumni network does work. I remember going into Japan once for a fundraising meeting, and I went to Japan for Tokyo for one day. And at both the meetings, I was meeting at Japanese institutions, and it just by coincidence, the guy sitting across me at both the meetings went to Booth. What is the odds of an Indian raising a fund, landing up in Tokyo and having, And it's that connection which sort of helped me raise our second fund, just because I had these random 2 meetings. So use the alumni network also to connect with people. Presumably people have a lot more time today, so you can do that also.
Great. So before I make some concluding remarks, I want to ask you to each answer either a question of, I'm going to give you, it's going to be a multiple choice. You get to either give some advice you haven't yet imparted to students, share something that you really wanted to cover that hasn't come up, or answer this question that students have asked, which is, can you share a memory of something a classmate did to step up during the time you were in school that really inspired you? Can you share a memory of something a classmate did to step up that really inspired you? So either that, or something that your last advice, or for students during this time, or something that you really wanted to cover that I promised I would ask you about and failed to deliver on.
Okay, I'm going to take the chance to talk about both briefly. So one is about my classmates. I was a foreigner, so it was difficult in '89 with jobs being scarce for a foreigner to get a job. And my roommates, Bruce and Wim, really stood up over there and, and helped me because they were getting the offers. Wim went to McKinsey, Bruce went to Wall Street, but they were there to support me and sort of take me to the rough times. The advice I want to leave is something which Kate triggered off, which is she talked a lot about focusing on your lifetime partner, focus on what's in your belly. And this is an advice I was given years back and I found it to be the best advice I've ever been given. Focus on the important things in life. For each of you, figure out what's important for you. It's different for different people. But once you've got that, and sometimes it's that little thing in your belly, or it's your lifetime partner. For me, when I was given this advice, it was my 2 kids. That makes life so much easier for you once you've got that. Focus on the important things in life.
Yeah, I'll go next because that was awesome, Louis. I would say from the classmate perspective, and it was on the down low and quite quiet. One of my classmates who was went to consulting and was an excellent interviewer for interviewee for consulting, offered to do interview practice for anyone that was interested. People were so stressed about getting jobs and whatever else. She just offered to help people, whatever they needed, whenever they needed it, sort of on their calendar. And it's a little thing, but it went a long way as people are nervous to get some of that feedback from someone that's considered excellent. From an advice perspective, I think at the end of the day, one of the neat things about everybody on this phone call and everybody that's at Booth is you have already taken one of the biggest risks of your life by going to Booth, by either giving up your job or going here as a part-time student and doing it double, all the stuff that you're doing. You're already a risk taker that's willing to adjust your life, be flexible, and figure out what you're going to do in the future without any prescribed path at all. And so this is just one of those hurdles that may be much taller than the other ones you faced before, but you will get through it. And you will have amazing stories to share with everybody on the call 20 years from now about what you went through to get through that. So just try to keep that perspective in place. You are already amazing and you will also get through this.
Thank you, Kate, Louis. That's incredible. I love that. I'm scribbling furiously to take these notes down. I guess I have.
Page of notes.
Mine doesn't look like that. I'm scribbling in the margins, but maybe you could fax that out or whatever technology you care to use. So I guess I want to echo what Kate said. So when I was a first year, the number of hours that second year spent with us case interview practicing was staggering. And at the second year, I did that as much as there was appetite for it. I literally would sit in the lounge in the building and just practice the people. So I guess the first part is the thing that inspired me most in terms of behavior of my fellow students was the extent to which we were willing to help one another. And there's not one specific example. It's more of sort of a pervasive tendency to help each other. It was not zero sum. Everybody could win and succeed. So that was huge. The second thing I want to share is something that may be hard to hear, but none of us is entitled. All right. Well, I know that definitively that when I arrived at Booth, I thought that I had got a winning lottery ticket, and the reality is nothing is guaranteed, and none of us is entitled. Now, with that being said, that does not mean that we are not capable and in particular deserving, but we're not entitled. So what does that mean? So here's my advice. If I go into whether it's networking or sort of my career search, right? And if I go in the orientation of what can you do for me, it's very different to me going into the interaction thinking, what do I have to bring to the situation? What can I do for or with you, or what can we do for or with each other? And I think that boils down to a mindset of how can I be of service? How can I be a net contributor instead of a net taker? And it's a subtle mind shift, but it's really, really true. And if you take that and couple it with a commitment to being your authentic self, really amazing things can happen. Because you can only be you. I can only be me. And not everybody's gonna like me, but that's okay, because I don't need everybody to like me. I just need to be surrounded by people who, at least at minimum, can accept me for who I am authentically. And if I take authenticity and of service and put them together, I think really cool things can happen.
Well, thank you so much. First, to our panelists for joining. It's been extraordinary for me to get to reconnect and connect with you over the course of the week as we planned this. It's been, for students who are student group leaders and pivoting and planning events, it's a new experience to reach out to people sort of 5 days ahead of time and pull together a panel. So it can be done, and there are alum cheering for you and rooting for you from all over the world. So many thanks. Thank you to students who joined us. It's a beautiful day. You are in virtual classes. You're in front of screens a lot more than was imaginable a few weeks ago. So thank you for taking the time to join us here today. I do want to say in closing, there were some questions that I didn't address. And in particular, there were a few about how to manage anxiety, which is really important. And if you are looking for resources for that, Student Life has shared a number and will continue to, but please don't hesitate to avail yourself of those. It's really critical at a time like this, as it is always, to practice self-care. As I represent both the Rustandy Center and all of our friends at the other centers around Booth, know that we are working really hard to bring you programming that's both relevant to today's moment and bringing a lot of our programs online, upcoming Business Society and Self program, which is something that the Rosenblum Center runs every spring, Perspectives in Philanthropy, Perspectives in Sustainability, to bring you a lot of the rich content that you're accustomed to getting, albeit in a different format. And we'll continue to have conversations around some of the themes that COVID-19 raises for all of us. As well, the Rosenblum Center is working with student leaders and our nonprofit contacts and small business contacts in the Polsky Center to help make it easier for you to jump in to volunteer opportunities for those of you looking to give back during this time. So more to come on that. And I really want to thank all of you and thank the Davis Center and Student Life for partnering to make this possible. So with that, I will end the meeting and wish everyone a safe afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Caroline. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Dean. Lovely.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Bye. Cheers.
Bye.